25 years ago, BMW approved a concept sketch that was done in 2 hours on a flight by the legendary Frank Stephenson. 6 weeks later, the team that had worked on the Lamborghini Miura turned that sketch into a full concept, and it was approved for production at the BMW South Carolina factory in the United States. 4 generations and millions of cars later, we have an icon of the United States roadway, the BMW X5. Today, we're talking about the 4th generation G05 X5. I'm Alex Nelson. Welcome back to another FCP Euro Buyer's Guide. So what is the BMW X5? Well, in their model lineup, it's basically the golden retriever. It's the perfect sweet spot right in the middle, which makes sense because that's where they started after all. It was their first SUV, and as Frank Stephenson put it when he designed it, it's just a giant BMW station wagon. It adheres to on-road principles a lot more than off-road principles, which explains why its only off-road package it's ever received only lasted 2 production years. If you're looking for the car that does it all, such as hauling your family around, helping you move, tow a boat, or handling inclement weather, all while looking tough and driving great on a B-road, the X5 is basically the answer. All while coming in at a reasonable price, especially on the used market these days, you can get them with great engines, great transmissions, and a pretty durable powertrain that won't rust into the ground. As I said, since its inception, it's basically been a giant station wagon, and over the last 4 generations, it really hasn't changed all that much. In fact, the last clean sheet redesign of the X5 and its suspension and architecture was actually all the way back in 2006. Since then, all the way up to 2018, the F15 and the E70 generations, which preceded the G05, were actually pretty much the same car underneath. They had the same suspension parts, the same wheel bearings, you name it, they were basically the same car. The G05 marks a huge step up in both comfort, NVH, and luxury over its predecessors. Now, as I said, the suspension architecture hasn't really evolved that much since the E70 in 2006. And this is because they pretty much nailed it on the first go-around. Using the suspension from the E39, the integral link rear suspension, along with the double wishbone front suspension, new on the E70, shared by the E60, was a fantastic starting point, and much of that architecture has carried over into the G05, albeit with all new parts. While BMW has been perfecting the formula of its giant station wagon, there's been competitors that have taken notice. There's a lot of competition on the market with similar engine options, similar option packages at a similar price. Let's go over them. Porsche and Mercedes are, of course, one of the most obvious options with the GLE and the Cayenne. They've had those around for just about as long as the X5 has been around. Audi also has the Q7, and then there's the other options which are a little bit less known about, such as the Volvo XC90, the Genesis GV80 as of late, and the Lexus RX. All are pretty much great options, but as you can see, the X5 does have some unique qualities which basically none of those competitors have ever adopted. It toes the line between an off-road vehicle and a station wagon. Now, BMW usually runs its chassis for around 7 years. The G05 started in 2019, and it's pretty safe to assume that next year, 2026, will be the last year that the G05 will be available for purchase. Now, amongst this huge spread of cars comes a huge spread of values, and we'll get into the models in a minute. A base G05 X5 40i with B58 straight 6 can be had for as little as 19 grand these days in 2025, and a decent example can be found in the mid-20s. Now, there are issues with these cars at higher mileages, and we'll get into that later. All the way up to the X5M, you can pretty much find this price spread. You'll have X5Ms that are in the 60s and 70K range, and then you can have some that are really highly optioned that are well over $100,000. Now at that point, there's a ton of other options out there that can pretty much do the same job, so I suspect a lot of folks will be picking these up in the $20,000 to $30,000 range. Now, I mentioned that 40i base model X5, like this one right here. There are a ton of different powertrain, aesthetic, and option packages under the G05 umbrella and its sister car, the G06 X6. So let's talk about what the numbers on the tailgate actually mean. Now, BMW has lost their way a bit with this. These numbers on the tailgate used to mean something, But these days, they're basically just a suggestion. With the E53 X5 and the early E70, 4.4, 4.6, and 4.8 all meant the displacement of that V8 engine, and 3.0 meant 3-liter straight six. These days, however, they mean a whole lot more. Now, before we get into all the engine craziness on the G05 platform, let's talk about the badge that's next to the engine and trim designation, X-Drive, or S-Drive, depending on which option your car has. S-Drive just means rear wheel drive. There's no front differential, there's no transfer case, it's just a rear wheel drive car. I have a feeling the S alludes to doing a fishtail, not sure how that makes any sense. X-Drive, of course, is BMW's all-wheel drive system, and the basic way it works is roughly the same in all of their X-Drive cars. There's a transfer case bolted to the back of a manual or automatic transmission. In this case, it's only the ZF 8-speed. This transfer case has a chain which goes down to a lower sprocket, which has a flange for a front drive shaft, which shoots the power back to the front differential, which is mounted to the oil pan and out to the front wheels. These systems are almost always rear biased, and it actually shuts off the front wheel drive when it's cruising on the highway for good fuel economy, which this car nails. This thing, this 40i base model, gets about the same fuel economy as my diesel X5, which is insane given how heavy and large it is. The X-Drive system is pretty much a no-brainer except for a few issues they've had from the factory, and we'll get into more on that later. But first, the engines. Now, it goes without saying that everything I'm about to mention is for the US market only. If the X5 or X6 has a 40i, 45e, or 50e designation on the trunk, that means it's a 3-liter single turbo straight six. I know, none of those numbers even included 3.0. If it's a 50i M60 or full fat M or M competition, that means it's a hot V twin turbo V8. Everything I just mentioned all is fitted to the ZF 8-speed automatic transmission, and some variants will have an electric motor as the torque converter instead of a conventional hydraulic torque converter. So it goes like this from bottom to top, although I'm sure people will have opinions on which should be at the top. Starting in 2018 for the 2019 model year, you've got the X5 40i. This is the B58 Gen 2 straight six, and that's all there is to it. It's not a hybrid, it's not a plug-in electric vehicle, it's just a straight six, and a very good one at that. If you want to learn more about that straight six, we've got an engine guide specifically talking about the B58, all the common issues, and the multiple generations. Stepping up from the 40i, you have the 45e, which is quite a bit harder to come by, and that's the second generation B58, as I mentioned previously, but with an electric motor positioned where the torque converter usually is in that ZF 8-speed transmission. That gives it a big boost in torque with a little bit of electric-only range. However, it does come with quite a bit of complexity, such as an additional electric pump in the transmission and a whole bunch of other coolant lines since it has its own hybrid cooling system. This is officially a plug-in electric vehicle, so if you have a short commute or you live in the city, that might make sense. This idea made enough sense that BMW followed it up with the 50e. That is the third generation or B58 TU2 engine plus that electric motor again, although this time it was revamped to make more power again. Now, if you want your X5 like they used to be with that V8, they do still make an all-gas V8 option, and that started in 2019 with the X5 50i. Albeit it had its own complexities and problems, but the N63 T3, or the fourth generation of N63, is quite a bit better than the older units in the early 2010s. This was a hot V twin turbo 4.4 liter V8, which punches well above its weight and still gets great fuel economy. Now, BMW actually followed that act up with the M50i. This was an even hotter version of that N63, albeit with the same generation, just using a few tweaks here and there to make a little bit more power. This was only sold with the M Sport package, so if you want that extra grunt, you're gonna have to get the M Sport suspension, the styling, etc. Now, if we're going chronologically, after the M50i, you have the X5M, but if we don't obey the rules of time, what really comes after that in the ladder is the M60 variant. The S68 is the electrified hybrid version of the X5M's S63 engine, which you could also find in the M5. This trim, the M60, has already been shown to be faster than a lot of the outgoing pure M cars, which is kind of wild considering it's a M Lite. Of course, going one rung further up the ladder brings us to the full-fat X5M and X5M competition, which are pure gas and just have the S63 engine with all-wheel drive as standard. The S63 was originally found in the X5M and F10 back in the day, and they've continued iterating on it until they could meet today's emissions regulations. And of course, 600 horsepower is cool too. Now, as I mentioned, we have a B58 engine guide to go over that wonderful 3-liter straight six, and we also have an S63 engine guide, which Gareth did an awesome job on, and that covers the fundamentals of that hot V twin turbo V8, albeit from a couple generations ago. The engine really is fundamentally the same as it was 10 or 15 years ago, so it's probably worth the watch if you're interested in that M50, 50i, or even the X5M variants. So now that we've got all the engine variants out of the way, let's talk about the suspension. Now, this is where the G05 diverges from its predecessors a bit. The E53, E70, and F15 X5s were all available with steel springs all the way around or steel springs in the front with air suspension in the back. The E53 was actually also optionable with air all the way around. This was awesome if you frequently used your X5 like a pickup truck, like I do, or you tow stuff because the rear had self-leveling, but you had the simplicity of only one axle with air suspension. For the G05 generation, they've gone with two options. You can either have all steel with adaptive dampers if you want, or you can have all air. There's no in between and there's no mixing rear air with steel front suspension in the US market. This is kind of a bummer because if you do some sleuthing, you'll find out just how expensive these air struts are, and the rear is no longer a divorced airbag and strut like an F15 or an E70 or an E53. Instead, it is a U-shaped bag over strut design, which means you have to replace the entire strut all as one unit instead of just replacing that bag. If you've owned an X5 previously with the divorced bag and strut setup, you'll know that just replacing the airbag is affordable and pretty easy to do as compared to this, where you're going to be replacing the entire air strut altogether. Now, as I mentioned, you can get steel all the way around, and if you get steel suspension with adaptive damping, you can get a very comfy ride, in fact, more comfortable than the previous generation air suspension. There's a reason that they went with a bag over strut design and multi-link in the rear instead of the integral link, which has been used since the E39. It's really comfy and it offers a lot of ride control. Now, everything I've mentioned is new for the G05 X5, and as I said, this is a completely new set of parts for the G05 versus the E70 and the F15. This upper control arm is all new, switch bone is all new, and the front tension strut and the control arm underneath is also new. If you want to learn more about the suspension and braking systems on the G05 X5, we have a whole guide outlining all the parts that fail, what you can do to save money, and of course we have the DIYs to show you how to service it yourself. Check it out on this YouTube channel. If it were my personal choice, I would probably get the steel suspension, just knowing how easily serviceable it is and how much less the dampers themselves cost. Then I would just run something like a helper bag system in the spring to make sure I can tow. So let's talk brakes. The X5 can be equipped with basically any size brake you could possibly imagine, and we're working diligently to make sure all of those kits are on FCPEuro.com. When you're shopping for brake kits or X5s themselves, you have to be really particular with exactly what you want because there are a ton of different brake packages. If you want a car with third row seating, that's its own brake size. If you want a car with just the V8 and not M Sport, that's also its own brake size. If you want to get bigger brakes than M Sport, there's an M Performance brake kit just for that. We mentioned this in our suspension and brake guide, and make sure if you're shopping for one of these cars, you know what you're getting into because some of the brake systems are very, very expensive to service, just like the X5M or the M Sport brakes. So just be aware when shopping for an X5 that based on which brake package you get will probably determine how expensive your brake service is going to be, and some of the packages, especially the one with nearly 400mm rear rotors, can be extremely expensive to service, probably a 4-digit cost on that brake job. Long story short, if you're going to purchase one of these cars that's over 50, 60,000 miles, basically every single one is going to have this front tension strut bushing totally obliterated and actually probably leaking hydraulic bushing fluid. So make sure you keep an eye out for that when you go to purchase an X5. So now that you know what makes an X5 stop and steer, let's talk about some options and wrap up with common issues. Now, something you might be already familiar with is LCI, or Life Cycle Impulse. That's an update BMW does about halfway through the production run to facelift its cars and make them a little bit more sellable before they end production. This car right here is a pre-facelift, so pre-LCI M Sport, and that one behind me is a base model. For the G05, 2024 marked the year of the LCI, but the biggest change was actually on the inside. For 2024, they ditched this classic BMW twin screen setup, which is perfection in my opinion, and they went with the big curved iDrive 8 display. Now, if that's your thing, more power to you. iDrive 8.5, which replaced iDrive 8 afterwards, is probably a substantial upgrade that you're going to want to look for, as iDrive 8 had some issues with navigation and getting to the climate functions rapidly. I personally am a huge fan of the split screen, and can we just talk about how nice of a place this car is to be? Our car in particular shows off a lot of the pretty crazy options that X5s can have, and it's not a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley, but for the money, this is pretty nuts. Aside from the basic things like a wireless charger and a heated steering wheel, this thing also has heated and cooled massaging seats and a heated and cooled cup holder set, along with air ride that's adjustable up and down. You can really slam this thing if you want to. And the overall fit and finish of everything is really nice. Although I should mention that cars with extended leather dashboards, aka stitching on the dash, which ours doesn't have, do have issues with the adhesive going bad and the leather peeling up. So if you find a car with all these options, but without that extended leather, might be a blessing in disguise. Something else that's worth mentioning on the interior, be on the lookout when searching for these cars for burnt out LED modules. Many of them are wired or kind of organized in series, so if one goes out, you'll see the whole dash LED strip will not work, or like in our case, our Bowers and Wilkins stereo doesn't have lit up speakers. I know, cry me a river, but when you pay for all of it, you kind of want it to work. Now, aside from things like the HUD and the heated and cooled cup holders, which are sweet, there's also some really nice to have stuff in here, like the USB-C ports in the center console, the seats, there's a USB-A port up here, 12-volt socket, your standard stuff, it all works very well, and a 12-volt socket in the rear should you choose to charge something in the back of the car, which is very handy. Now, if all this crazy equipment sounds really expensive to fix and replace, it is. Let's talk about the stuff that breaks on the G05 X5. Now, as I activate my whole body activation, let's talk about something that can actually ruin all of this stuff inside of the car, and that is water intrusion, specifically through the sunroof and the shark fin antenna for the radio. This is a huge problem for G05 X5s, G06 X6s, and G07 X7s, and it's been documented through hundreds of cases of damaged radio telematics modules, damaged antennas, and even completely totaled cars. In fact, one of our catalog associates over on the VW Audi team had an uncle whose car was fully totaled out, yes, a new G05 X5, because of water intrusion through the sunroof, completely destroying the wiring harness and the junction box over on the passenger side of the car. I actually have a sneaking suspicion that that's the reason that our lit up Bowers & Wilkins speakers aren't so lit up. Basically, in the sun, the seals on this car shrink, and since they're a multi-piece design, large gaps open up in between the seals, letting in too much water, which overwhelms the sunroof tray, and it basically floods the whole top of the car with water. Water comes out of the microphones for the CarPlay, it can come out of the headliner. It's really not a good time. So if you're searching for one of these cars, before you even test drive it, take a look at the gap on the weather stripping on the roof. It'll give you a good indicator of if the car has been stored outside most of its life, and if you do want to purchase the car and fix those seals, we have a DIY showing you how to replace every single seal on the sunroof of a G05 X5. With the sunroof seal out of the way, let's talk about the other maintenance items on the G05 X5. One of the other largest issues that applies to all G05s, unless they have S-Drive, is the transfer case and the front differential. Now, the transfer case, the ATX 13 unit, has a tiny little clutch basket about this big, which is what determines how much power is sent to the front differential. This clutch basket has been known to have huge issues, and unfortunately, BMW even equipped these transfer cases with the wrong fluid from the factory for some years. So they've even announced their own service bulletin, and this applies to a lot more cars than just the X5 and the X6. If you feel shuddering or some sort of binding noise while turning, which unfortunately is reported by about 25% of all G05 X5 customers at the dealership, well, then you either will need to replace that fluid and hope for the best, or replace those clutches or the transfer case entirely. Now, obviously, the first thing to try is replacing that fluid, and we have a DIY showing how to replace that fluid in the front diff, the rear diff, just for precaution, and of course, the transfer case itself. Now, one other issue that BMW G chassis vehicles face is the active grille shutters. Now, these are fantastic for fuel economy, and it's part of the reason that this car gets 10 better MPG than the Ineos Grenadier, which has similar weight and the exact same B58 engine. These active grille shutters close while the vehicle is cruising, which not only conveniently protects your radiators from rocks and other debris, but it makes the car super slippery and lowers drag. Then they open when you come up to an intersection. You actually might see this in the rearview mirror if you're driving next to one. These active grille shutters can have faults and the motors can go bad or be filled with debris from salt, other road debris, you name it. And this will throw a check engine light. And very ironically, this will prevent you from passing emissions in your state if it throws a check engine light from those motors being jammed up with debris. We have a DIY on how to replace both the upper and the lower grille shutters on the G05, should you choose to replace it yourself. Now, this issue is actually so bad that BMW has extended a factory warranty or a service package for 150,000 miles or 15 years, whichever comes first, on G chassis BMWs to replace these upper and lower grille shutters for free should they go bad. Now, if we dive into those V8 and straight six engine options specifically, they both have their own issues, although the B58 straight six is miles better with reliability than the N63 engine. Now, I know you V8 fanboys, I'm one of them, want to believe that the N63 TU3 is a lot better than its previous generations, which it is, but it's still nowhere near the reliability of the B58. Long story short, the issues are as follows. The V8 will typically have a thermostat, water pump, or timing cover gasket replaced before around 100,000 miles, and they have some other issues with seals around the engine, such as the turbo oil return cover, which sits in the hot V just under the turbos, or the rear crank seal being replaced on quite a few cars as well. Now, yes, you heard me correctly, that was rear crankshaft seal. These are not easy DIYs to do. They're pretty advanced and will require removing the transmission to access some of those parts. Now, as far as the B58 goes, its failings are basically due to plastic componentry, such as the heat management module, the oil filter housing, or the plastic oil pump on the 2019 and 2020 production vehicles. It's a real shame that they had to add so much plastic to what is otherwise such a reliable engine. Be sure to follow BMW's maintenance procedures with oil changes and the correct oil grades for either of these engines. Also, if you choose to get a 45E or a 50E with that hybrid ZF 8-speed, there have been reports of that electric motor coming apart and basically throwing debris all inside of the bell housing, which can lead to some pretty costly repairs if it's not under warranty. So be on the lookout for service history that involves attending to the electric drive unit. Both the N63 V8 or S63 V8 and the B58 straight six suffer from typical BMW problems as well, such as leaking expansion tanks or hydrolysis that expands plastic cooling flanges attached to the head or the block and causes them to fail. All these things are available at fcpeuro.com, and we try to have DIYs available for basically everything under the sun on these two engines. We hope you've enjoyed this video on the G05 X5, and best of luck in searching for your own or maintaining one that you just wanted to know more about. We've got guides if you want to dive deeper into the suspension and braking systems or the engines themselves, and tons of in-stock parts here for all BMW G chassis at fcpeuro.com. Be sure to like and comment and let me know anything I missed, and subscribe for more videos in the future like this one. I'm Alex Nelson, and thanks for watching.